Commander Zalthor stood before the observation window, his 4 eyes tracking the distant planet below. Meridian 7 burned. Orange flames marked where the Kreshtar had torn through the colony's defenses. The insectoid swarm had arrived 3 days ago, and now 20,000 colonists were trapped in underground shelters, waiting for death. Zalthor clicked his mandibles in frustration. The Vrex Empire had sent him to coordinate the defense, but there was nothing left to defend. The Kreshtar numbers were overwhelming. Every military doctrine he had studied in his 40 years of service said the same thing: evacuate and abandon the planet, cut your losses, save who you can. But the Coalition Council had other ideas. "Commander, the human vessel is approaching," his aide announced. Zalthor turned from the window. "Humans. The Council actually called for human assistance?" "Yes, Commander. They should arrive within the hour." Zalthor felt his inner stomachs churn. He had heard stories about humans, of course. Everyone in the galaxy had. They were a young species, barely 200 years into space travel. Their technology was primitive compared to the Vrex or the Thessian Collective. Their ships were slower, their weapons less refined, but the rumors spoke of something else, something that made even veteran warriors uncomfortable in their presence. Zalthor dismissed such talk as propaganda. Every species liked to make themselves sound more dangerous than they were. It was simple psychology. The humans were probably no different. An hour later, the human ship dropped out of faster-than-light travel. Zalthor studied it through the observation sensors. The vessel was called the UESS Valiant, and it looked exactly as he expected: blocky, functional, covered in armor plating that seemed excessive for a ship of its size. Humans apparently believed in brute force over elegance. The ship was small too, a cruiser at best. Zalthor's own command vessel could swallow it whole. How many soldiers could such a ship carry? 200? 300 at most? Against the Kreshtar swarm numbering in the hundreds of thousands? It was suicide. His communication console chirped. The humans were requesting permission to dock and meet with command staff. Zalthor granted it, though he wondered what possible strategy these primitives could offer. The human captain arrived in the conference room 30 minutes later. He was tall for his species, with short dark hair graying at the temples. His uniform was simple, marked with insignia that meant nothing to Zalthor. The human walked with an easy confidence that seemed almost careless. "Captain Jake Morrison, United Earth Expeditionary Force," the human said, extending his hand. Zalthor knew about this gesture. Humans pressed their hands together as a greeting. He touched his primary manipulator to the human's hand briefly. The human's skin was warm, surprisingly warm. The Vrex were cold-blooded. "Commander Zalthor, Vrex Imperial Defense Force. Captain Morrison, I will be direct. The situation on Meridian 7 is beyond salvage. The Kreshtar outnumber us significantly. I recommend we focus on evacuation procedures." Morrison smiled. Actually smiled. Zalthor found it unsettling how humans showed their teeth when expressing positive emotions. Among the Vrex, showing teeth was a threat display. "We didn't come here to evacuate, Commander," Morrison said. "We came here to fight." "Fight? Captain, your ship carries what, 300 soldiers?" 240 Marines, actually. Plus support staff and pilots. Zalthor's translator device struggled with the human's casual tone. This human seemed to think 200 soldiers was adequate. "Captain, the Kreshtar have at least 400,000 warriors on that planet. Your numbers are insignificant." Morrison pulled up a holographic display. "We've reviewed the tactical situation. The Kreshtar have concentrated their forces around the colony's main shelters. They're preparing for a final assault. We estimate we have 12 hours before they breach the doors. Yes, which is why evacuation must begin immediately. Commander, with respect, we're not leaving those people to die. Morrison's tone remained friendly, but something in his eyes changed, hardened. My Marines are already preparing for deployment. We're going down there. Zalthor felt his frustration building. These humans were either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. Captain Morrison, I have studied warfare for 4 decades. The Kreshatar are a hive species. They do not fear death. They will overwhelm your forces through sheer numbers. This is not a battle you can win. A female human stepped forward. She was shorter than Morrison, with red hair tied back tightly. Her uniform identified her as a lieutenant. Commander Zalthor, we appreciate your concern, but humanity has faced overwhelming odds before. It's kind of our specialty. Morrison nodded. This is Lieutenant Lisa Grant, my tactical officer. She's put together an operation plan. We'd like your approval to proceed. Zalthor looked at the data Grant provided. The plan was insane. The humans wanted to drop directly into the heart of the Kreshatar territory using what they called drop pods. These were essentially armored coffins that would fall from orbit at terminal velocity. The survival rate for such an insertion method seemed impossibly low. You want to drop your soldiers directly into an enemy swarm? Zalthor asked. It's the fastest way to reach the colonists, Grant explained. We'll establish a defensive perimeter around the shelters and hold until the evacuation ships arrive. And if you cannot hold? Morrison's smile returned, but this time it looked different. Dangerous. We'll hold, Commander. That's what we do. Zalthor wanted to argue further, but Coalition Command had given the humans operational authority. He could advise, but he could not stop them. He wondered if Earth Command knew they were sending their soldiers to die on a distant world. Over the next few hours, Zalthor watched the human preparations. The Marines moved with practiced efficiency, checking weapons and armor. They seemed relaxed. Some were laughing. Others listened to music through small devices in their ears. One group was playing cards. Zalthor approached a squad leader, a human named Marcus Webb. Webb was inspecting his rifle, a kinetic weapon that fired metal projectiles. Primitive, but supposedly effective at close range. Sergeant Webb, you seem unconcerned about the upcoming battle, Zalthor observed. Webb looked up and grinned. Concerned? Sure, I'm concerned, Commander, but worry doesn't help anything. My squad is ready. We've trained for situations like this. Situations where you are outnumbered 2,000 to 1. We've faced worse odds. Not by much, but we're still here, aren't we? Zalthor couldn't tell if the human was joking. Their sense of humor was strange. You realize many of you will not survive this battle. Webb's expression became serious. Yeah, I know. But those people down there need help. Someone has to stand between them and those bugs. Might as well be us. The human returned to checking his weapon. Zalthor walked away, more confused than before. These humans spoke about dying as if it was just another part of their job, as if it was acceptable. The Vrex fought when necessary, but they valued survival above all else. These humans seemed to value something else entirely. The drop pods were loaded. 240 Marines climbed into their metal coffins. Captain Morrison gave a final speech over the communications channel. He spoke of duty and honor and protecting those who could not protect themselves. The Marines responded with a loud battle cry that made Zalthor's sensory organs ache. The pods launched. Zalthor watched them fall toward the planet like metal rain. He calculated survival probabilities in his head. They were not good. He wondered if Earth Command would blame him for allowing this disaster to occur. Then Morrison appeared beside him at the observation window. The captain was calm. Too calm. "Commander, you're about to see why the galaxy tells stories about us," Morrison said quietly. "My Marines are the best in the business. Watch them work." Zalthor said nothing. He simply watched the pods disappear into the planet's atmosphere, trailing fire behind them. In 12 hours, he would either witness a miracle or write condolence letters to 240 human families. He suspected it would be the latter. The drop pods screamed through the atmosphere. Zalthor monitored their descent from the command center, watching heat signatures bloom red on his displays. The pods were moving at speeds that should tear them apart. Yet somehow, they held together. Human engineering was crude, but apparently sturdy. Lieutenant Grant stood at a nearby console, her fingers dancing across holographic controls. She was listening to the Marines' communication channel. Zalthor activated his own translator to listen as well. What he heard confused him. The Marines were singing. Actually singing. Some old human war song about glory and death. Their voices mixed with static and the roar of atmospheric entry. But they sounded almost cheerful. Zalthor had led thousands of troops into battle. None of them had ever sung. 30 seconds to impact, Grant announced. Her voice was steady, professional. The pods hit the ground like meteors. Zalthor watched the impact markers appear on his tactical display. They had landed in a rough circle around the colony shelters, exactly as planned. Immediately, the Kreshatar swarm began converging on their position. The pods exploded open. Marines poured out, weapons raised. Zalthor switched to the visual feeds from orbital satellites. What he saw made his blood run cold. The Kreshatar were everywhere. Thousands of them. Their black chitinous bodies covered the ground like a living carpet. They moved on 6 legs, each creature the size of a human. Their mandibles could shear through steel. Their numbers were infinite. The Marines opened fire. The sound was deafening even through the satellite feed. Human kinetic weapons roared, spitting metal death at thousands of rounds per minute. Explosions bloomed as grenades detonated among the swarm. The Kreshatar shrieked and died, but more kept coming. "Webb, you've got a heavy concentration on your eastern flank," Grant said into her communications device. Her tone was casual, as if discussing the weather. "Copy that. Patterson, light them up," a male voice responded. That was Marcus Webb, the sergeant Zalthor had spoken with earlier. Another voice came through, younger and excited. "With pleasure, Sarge. Fire in the hole!" An explosion erupted on the eastern perimeter. Bodies flew through the air. The shockwave knocked down dozens of Kreshatar, but the gap in their lines closed within seconds as more insects rushed forward. Zalthor activated the zoom function on his display. He focused on Webb's squad. 9 humans in powered armor standing in a tight defensive formation. They fired with mechanical precision, each shot finding a target. When Kreshatar got too close, the humans switched to shorter weapons. Knives, clubs, some kind of vibrating blade that cut through chitin like soft tissue. One Kreshatar warrior broke through the line and tackled a human. The Marine went down. Zalthor expected to see the human torn apart, but instead, the Marine wrapped her legs around the insect and drove a knife into its skull. She pushed the corpse off and stood up, immediately resuming her firing position. "Ridge is down," someone called. "No, I'm good," a female voice responded. "Just got a little dirty. Thanks for asking." The humans laughed. They were actually laughing while surrounded by enemies. Zalthor's translator must be malfunctioning. No sane being would laugh in such circumstances. "Commander, the western perimeter is holding," Grant reported. "Eastern perimeter is stable. Northern sector reports heavy contact, but no casualties yet. Southern sector just called in a kill count of over 300. 300 Kreshatar killed in the first 5 minutes. Zalthor checked his calculations. At this rate, the humans might actually establish their defensive perimeter, but holding it was another matter entirely. The Kreshtar began coordinating their attacks. They had been probing the human defenses, testing for weaknesses. Now they committed their full strength. Wave after wave of insects crashed against the human lines. Zalthor watched a marine position get overrun. 10 Kreshtar swarmed a single human. The marine disappeared under the mass of bodies. Zalthor marked him as dead in his mental calculations. Then the marine stood up. His armor was scored and dented. Green blood covered his helmet. But he was alive and still fighting. He had killed all 10 Kreshtar in close combat. "Patterson, I need ordnance on coordinates marking Lima 7. Morrison's voice came through the command channel. "Captain, those coordinates are danger close to our own people," Grant observed. "I know, do it anyway." Grant transmitted the fire mission. Moments later, artillery shells from the Valiant's orbital guns struck the planet's surface. The explosions were massive, vaporizing everything in a 50-meter radius. The shells landed less than 20 meters from human positions. The humans didn't flinch. They used the confusion among the Kreshtar to advance their lines, pushing the swarm back. Zalthor couldn't believe what he was seeing. No species called down fire that close to their own troops. The risk of friendly casualties was too high. But the humans did it without hesitation. They trusted their weapons, trusted their calculations, trusted each other. "Multiple casualties in 3rd Squad," a voice reported. "We need medical." A human in different armor sprinted across the battlefield. She was marked as Amanda Ridge, the squad medic. Kreshtar warriors targeted her immediately, recognizing an opportunity. She ran through enemy fire without slowing down. Bullets and plasma bolts struck the ground around her feet. One shot hit her shoulder armor, spinning her half around. She kept running. Ridge reached the wounded Marines and dropped to her knees. She pulled out medical supplies and began working. Zalthor zoomed in closer. The medic was performing battlefield surgery while Kreshtar continued trying to kill her. Other Marines formed a protective circle, fighting with increased ferocity to keep the enemy away from their doctor and their wounded. "Ridge, we're getting you out of there," Webb's voice called. "Negative, Sergeant. I've got 2 Marines with critical injuries. I'm not leaving them." "Then we're staying with you." The defensive circle tightened. The humans fought like creatures possessed. One Marine's weapon jammed. He picked up a piece of broken Kreshtar carapace and used it as a club. Another Marine ran out of ammunition and drew 2 knives wading into the swarm. Zalthor had seen many battles. He had fought in dozens himself, but he had never seen anything like this. The Vreks were disciplined soldiers. They followed orders. They maintained formation. They fought efficiently and intelligently. The humans fought like madness given form. They adapted constantly. When the Kreshtar tried one tactic, the humans immediately countered. When ammunition ran low, they switched to backup weapons without missing a beat. When communications were jammed, they used hand signals. When night vision failed, they fought in darkness, using sound and instinct. A massive Kreshtar war beast emerged from the swarm. It stood 6 meters tall, covered in heavy armor plates. Its front limbs ended in massive scything claws. This creature could tear through armored vehicles. 3 of them had destroyed an entire Vrex battalion on the war moon of Kepler 442. The war beast charged toward Webb's position. The Marines fired everything they had at it. Bullets bounced off its armor. Grenades barely scratched it. The creature kept coming. "Patterson, please tell me you've got something special," Webb said calmly. "Oh, I've got something real special, Sarge. Everyone get down." Kyle Patterson, the demolitions expert, stood up. He was holding a long tube on his shoulder, some kind of rocket launcher. The Kreshtar war beast was 50 meters away, 40 meters, 30. Patterson waited. 20 meters. 15. "Patterson!" Webb shouted. "Wait for it," Patterson muttered. 10 meters. The war beast's shadow fell across the human position. Patterson fired. The rocket covered the distance in a fraction of a second. It struck the war beast directly under its head, where the armor was thinnest. The explosion was enormous. The creature's head simply ceased to exist. Its body crashed forward, sliding to a stop just meters from the human lines. "Boom," Patterson said simply. The Marines cheered. They actually cheered. They had just killed something that should have wiped out their entire squad, and they were celebrating like children at a festival. Zalthor realized his hands were shaking. Not from fear. From something else. Something he couldn't quite name. He was watching something unprecedented. Something that would change his understanding of warfare forever. These humans weren't just soldiers, they were something the galaxy hadn't seen before. They were predators who refused to recognize when they were the prey. "All sectors report perimeter established," Grant announced. Her voice held a note of satisfaction. "The colonists are being moved to the extraction point. Evacuation ships can begin landing in 2 hours. 2 hours, Morrison said. "All right, people, you heard the lieutenant. We hold for 2 hours. Then we go home." Zalthor looked at the tactical display. The humans had taken casualties, 15 wounded, 3 dead, but they had killed over 5,000 Kreshtar, and they were going to hold this position for 2 more hours against an endless swarm. For the first time in his military career, Zalthor began to understand why the galaxy feared humans. It wasn't their technology, it wasn't their numbers. It was something far more fundamental, something that lived in their bones and burned in their eyes. Humans simply did not know how to quit. The 2 hours passed like 2 years. Zalthor watched every second, unable to look away. The Kreshtar attacked in endless waves, and the humans held their ground. They fired until their weapons overheated, then kept firing. They fought until their armor cracked, then kept fighting. But something was changing on the battlefield. The defensive perimeter was holding, yes, but the Kreshtar were learning. They were adapting to human tactics, finding weak points, testing new approaches. Zalthor could see it in their movement patterns. The swarm was becoming more organized. "Captain Morrison," Zalthor said into his communications device. "The Kreshtar are changing their strategy. They're pulling back their forces." Morrison's voice came through, slightly distorted by interference. "We've noticed they're preparing for something big. I recommend you begin evacuation procedures immediately. Get your people out while you can." There was a pause. Then Morrison spoke, and Zalthor heard something new in the human's voice. Not fear, not hesitation, something else. Determination. "Negative, Commander, we're not evacuating." "Captain, be reasonable. You've accomplished the mission. The colonists are safe. There's no reason to risk your soldiers further." "The Kreshtar are still here. If we leave now, they'll just attack the next colony, the next planet. Someone else will die." "That's not acceptable." Zalthor felt his confusion growing. "You want to eliminate the entire Kreshtar presence? Captain, there are hundreds of thousands of them. Your force is too small." "Then we'd better get started. Morrison out." The communication ended. Zalthor stared at his console in disbelief. The humans were going on the offensive, against an enemy that outnumbered them by thousands to 1. It was suicide. It was insanity. It was apparently standard human tactics. Lieutenant Grant was already coordinating the new operation. She pulled up holographic maps showing Kreshtar positions across the planet. "We've identified the central hive. It's located here, about 50 kilometers north of the colony. Intelligence suggests the Kreshtar Queen is inside. If we can eliminate her..." The swarm will collapse. If, Zalthor emphasized. That's a significant assumption, Lieutenant. And even if it's true, you'll never reach the hive. The Kreshtar will have concentrated their forces around it. That's why we're not walking there, Grant said with a small smile. We're flying. On the planet's surface, human pilots were already climbing into their aircraft. Zalthor watched through the satellite feed as sleek fighter craft lifted off from the Valiant's landing bay. They were designated as Falcon-class interceptors, fast, maneuverable, and lightly armored, perfect for atmospheric combat. There were only 12 of them. The lead pilot identified himself as Lieutenant Brandon Cole. His voice came through the command channel with the same casual confidence Zalthor had noticed in all the humans. Valiant Control. This is Falcon Lead, Flight of 12 departing the barn, ready to knock on some doors. Copy that, Falcon Lead, Grant responded. Be advised, you're going into heavy anti-air coverage. We're tracking at least 40 Kreshtar flyer nests along your route. Only 40? Must be our lucky day. The fighters streaked across the sky at supersonic speeds. The Kreshtar responded immediately. Organic flyers launched from nests hidden in the canyons and forests. These creatures were bred for aerial combat, with razor wings and acid-spitting organs. They swarmed toward the human fighters like locusts. Zalthor expected to see the human aircraft destroyed in moments. The Kreshtar flyers had evolved over millions of years to dominate their skies. They were fast, agile, and numerous. The human pilots treated them like target practice. Brandon Cole's fighter rolled inverted and dove straight toward the largest swarm. His weapons blazed, cutting through flyers with precision fire. When 3 enemies surrounded him, he cut his engines and let his craft drop like a stone. The Kreshtar flyers crashed into each other. Cole reignited his engines and climbed away, leaving destruction in his wake. Splash 6, Cole reported cheerfully. These bugs really need to work on their formation flying. Another pilot, call sign Viper, executed a maneuver that should have torn her aircraft apart. She flew straight through a canyon at full speed, with Kreshtar flyers pursuing. At the last second, she pulled up vertical. Her pursuers couldn't match the maneuver and crashed into the canyon walls. That's 8 for me, Viper called. Hey, Cole, you're falling behind. The mission is about quality, not quantity, Viper. Keep telling yourself that, old man. The humans were actually playing while conducting a combat operation. Zalthor's translator struggled with their informal communication style, but the meaning was clear. These pilots were enjoying themselves. In less than 10 minutes, the human fighters had cleared the air of Kreshtar flyers and reached the hive location. Cole switched to a tactical channel. Valiant Control, we've got eyes on the target. It's big, really big. Looks like a small mountain, but it's all hive structure. On the ground, Morrison was already moving his Marines north. They had loaded into transport vehicles, crude armored trucks that looked barely capable of off-road travel, but they moved fast, crushing vegetation and smaller Kreshtar under their wheels. Zalthor activated multiple displays, trying to track everything happening at once. The fighter pilots were conducting bombing runs on the hive's outer defenses. The ground forces were racing through hostile territory, and the Kreshtar were responding with their full might. This is insane, Zalthor muttered. Grant glanced at him. This is Tuesday for us, Commander. The Marine convoy came under heavy attack. Kreshtar warriors emerged from the ground itself, ambushing the vehicles. Several trucks were destroyed. Marines bailed out, forming defensive positions instantly. They fought on foot, covering each other while moving forward. Marcus Webb's voice came through the communications. We've got a problem. Bridge ahead is destroyed. The gorge is too wide to jump. Can you go around? Morrison asked. Negative, sir. Would add 3 hours to our travel time. Then we go across. Sir, there is no across. It's a 100-meter drop. Morrison's response was typically human. Then we'll make a bridge. Patterson, how much demo cord do you have left? Kyle Patterson sounded confused. Quite a bit, Captain. But demo cord makes things fall down, not hold them up. Trust me on this one. What happened next violated every engineering principle Zalthor knew. The humans used explosive charges to collapse a section of cliff wall. The debris fell into the gorge, creating a rough ramp. Then they drove their vehicles down one side and up the other, somehow maintaining enough speed to make the climb. 3 vehicles didn't make it. They fell into the gorge. Zalthor marked those Marines as casualties. But when the remaining vehicles reached the other side and stopped, the crews that had fallen climbed out of the gorge on foot. Their vehicles were destroyed, but the humans were alive. They simply joined the other Marines and kept moving forward. Nothing stops these people, Zalthor said quietly. The hive loomed ahead. It was massive, a twisted structure of hardened resin and bone that rose 50 meters into the air. Thousands of Kreshtar warriors guarded its entrance, maybe tens of thousands. Zalthor couldn't get an accurate count. They covered the ground completely. The human force stopped at the edge of weapons range. Morrison climbed out of his vehicle and surveyed the hive through binoculars. Zalthor could see him through the satellite feed, standing completely exposed while enemy warriors prepared to charge. Well, Morrison said calmly, that's a lot of bugs. Sir, what's the plan? Webb asked. Morrison lowered his binoculars. We knock on the front door real loud. When they answer, we go inside. That's the whole plan? You have a better one? Webb considered this. Nope. Front door it is. The Marines formed a skirmish line. 211 soldiers against an army. Zalthor did the calculations automatically. Every Marine would need to kill over 1,000 Kreshtar to eliminate the threat. Impossible. Mathematically, tactically, logically impossible. All units, this is Morrison. The captain spoke into the command channel. His voice was steady, strong. I won't lie to you. This is going to be rough. But those people we saved today are alive because we did the impossible. Now, we're going to do it again. We're going into that hive. We're finding the queen. And we're ending this threat. Not for glory, not for recognition, but because it's the right thing to do, because someone has to, and because we can. Are you with me? The response was immediate. 200 voices shouted as one. Ura! The sound made Zalthor's sensory organs ache. It was primal. Ancient. The war cry of predators who refused to be prey. Morrison raised his hand. Then let's go to work. The Marines charged. Zalthor watched, unable to process what he was seeing. The humans ran toward certain death without hesitation. They fired as they advanced, their weapons creating a wall of lead and explosives. The Kreshtar swarm surged forward to meet them. The two forces collided with brutal violence, and somehow, impossibly, the humans began to win. They fought with a ferocity that terrified Zalthor. When weapons jammed, they used knives. When knives broke, they used their hands. When surrounded, they fought harder. When wounded, they kept fighting. When they should have died, they refused. Marcus Webb's squad punched through the center of the Kreshtar line. Amanda Ridge followed close behind, somehow keeping wounded Marines alive under impossible conditions. Kyle Patterson used his last demolition charges to blow open the hive entrance, creating a breach in the seemingly impenetrable structure. Morrison led the first wave inside. His voice came through the command channel, distorted by interference from the hive's organic walls. We're in, moving to locate the Queen. Valiant, tell the commander we'll be home for dinner. The communication cut out. The hive's structure blocked transmissions. Zalthor could no longer see what was happening inside. He could only wait and wonder if any humans would come out alive. Lieutenant Grant stood at her console watching the same blank displays. Her face was calm, but her hands gripped the edge of the console tightly. "They'll make it," she said quietly. "They always do." Zalthor said nothing. He had stopped making predictions about what humans could or couldn't do. They had proven him wrong too many times already. The waiting was worse than the battle. Zalthor stared at his displays showing nothing but static. Inside the hive, 200 human soldiers were fighting for their lives, and he could not see them, could not help them, could only wait. Grant paced behind her console, her professional calm finally cracking. She checked her chronometer every few seconds. 12 minutes since they entered. Average expected combat time for hive infiltration is 15 to 20 minutes. Based on what data? Zalthor asked. Based on the 3 other hives we've cleared this year. Zalthor's sensory organs twitched in surprise. You've done this before? Kreshatar infestations aren't uncommon. They breed fast and spread faster. We've been helping colonies deal with them for 2 years now. Grant stopped pacing and looked at Zalthor directly. The galaxy doesn't hear about most of it. Humans don't fight for recognition. We fight because someone has to. A burst of static interrupted them. Morrison's voice came through, broken and distorted. Valiant, taking heavy? Need orbital. Coordinates following. Grant's hands flew across her console. I've got their position. They're deep in the hive structure, near what we think is the Queen's chamber. Captain, you're too deep for orbital strikes. The hive will absorb the impact. Morrison's response was garbled, but one word came through clearly. Anyway. Grant looked at Zalthor. Her expression was grim. He wants us to fire anyway. He's willing to bring the whole hive down on top of them if it means killing the Queen. That's suicide, Zalthor said. That's commitment. Grant entered the firing solution. Orbital batteries charged and ready, firing in 30 seconds. God help them. The Valiant's main guns spoke. Energy beams lanced down from orbit, striking the hive with enough force to vaporize solid rock. The structure shook. Cracks appeared in its walls. Sections began to collapse, but the hive held. It was too massive, too deeply rooted. The orbital strike damaged it, but didn't destroy it. Communications remained silent. Zalthor counted seconds in his head. 60, 90, 120. Then a massive explosion erupted from inside the hive. Not from orbit, from within. The entire structure shuddered and began to collapse inward. Towers of hardened resin crumbled, walls fell. The hive was dying. "What happened?" Zalthor demanded. Grant checked her readings. Looks like someone set off a chain reaction in the hive's support structures. Patterson probably used every explosive he had left. The whole thing is coming down. With your people inside. I know. Grant's voice was barely a whisper. On the planet's surface, Kreshatar warriors across the continent suddenly stopped fighting. They stood motionless, as if listening to something only they could hear. Then they began to flee. The swarm was collapsing, just as human intelligence had predicted. The Queen was dead. But so were the Marines who killed her. Zalthor watched the hive continue to collapse. Dust clouds rose hundreds of meters into the air. No one could survive that devastation. No one. Grant stood frozen at her console. Her professional composure was gone. She looked younger suddenly, vulnerable. "Come on," she whispered. "Come on, Morrison, don't you dare die on me." Minutes passed. The hive settled into ruins. The dust began to clear. Zalthor's sensors showed no signs of life, no movement, nothing. Then a piece of debris shifted. A figure emerged from the rubble, covered in dust and blood. Then another, and another. The humans were alive. Zalthor zoomed in on the survivors. Morrison led them, supporting a wounded soldier on his shoulder. Marcus Webb followed, limping badly but still carrying his weapon. Amanda Ridge was there, her medical pack torn open but her hands still steady as she treated injuries while walking. Kyle Patterson emerged, his armor cracked and scorched from explosions. More Marines pulled themselves from the ruins. Some were carried by their comrades, some crawled, but they came out. They kept coming out. Grant counted quietly. 42, 43, 44. Her voice was shaking. The evacuation continued. Human pilots landed their fighters, using them as makeshift ambulances. Transport vehicles that had survived the battle rushed forward to collect the wounded. The Marines helped each other, refusing to leave anyone behind. One Marine was still trapped under debris. Zalthor could see him on the satellite feed, pinned beneath a massive section of hive wall. Morrison and Webb tried to lift it, but even with their powered armor, the weight was too much. Then every Marine in range dropped what they were doing and ran to help. 20 soldiers grabbed the debris and lifted together. They strained. The debris shifted. They lifted harder. The wall section moved. The trapped Marine crawled free. "That's all of them," Grant said. Her voice was thick with emotion. "All accounted for. 198 mobile, 13 wounded critical, 0 killed." Zalthor couldn't believe it. 0? No one died in that collapse? Patterson timed the charges to give them an escape route. Crazy demolitions expert blew a tunnel through the back wall just as the hive came down. They all made it out. On the planet's surface, Morrison was organizing the withdrawal. His voice came through clearly now. "All personnel, fall back to the landing zone. Mission accomplished. Time to go home." But something was wrong. Zalthor's sensors detected movement from the hive ruins. Something massive was emerging from the deepest part of the structure. Something that had survived. "Captain, we're reading massive life signs," Grant called out urgently. "Whatever it is, it's big, really big." Morrison turned to face the ruins. "I see it. All units, defensive formation. We've got one more dance left." The thing that emerged made the war beast look small. It was the size of a building, covered in thick armor plates. The Queen. She had survived the hive's collapse, and now she was angry. The Queen roared, a sound that shook the ground. Kreshatar warriors that had been fleeing suddenly stopped and turned back. They were being recalled by their queen. The swarm was rallying for one final assault. "Tactical assessment?" Morrison asked calmly. Webb surveyed the situation. "We're low on ammunition. Most heavy weapons are expended. Half our people are wounded, and that thing looks really angry." "So, we're exactly where we want them," Morrison said. "Tired, beaten, and dangerous. Just another Tuesday." A young voice spoke up. Zalthor recognized it as Danny Torres, a private who had barely spoken during the entire operation. "Sir, I'm scared." Morrison looked at the young soldier. "Good. Fear keeps you alive. But don't let it stop you from doing what needs to be done. You've already proven yourself today, Torres. You carried Webb out of the hive when he was wounded. You're a Marine. Act like it." Torres straightened. "Yes, sir." The Queen charged. Her massive bulk moved with terrible speed. The ground shook with each step. Kreshtar warriors followed in her wake, thousands of them, perhaps the last survivors of the swarm. The Marines formed a thin line between the charging horde and their wounded. They had almost no ammunition left. Their armor was damaged. Their weapons were failing. By every logical measure, they should have retreated, should have run. Instead, they opened fire. What few working weapons remained spat their last rounds. Grenades flew through the air. Marines with no ammunition picked up rocks and threw them. Anything to slow the charge. Amanda Ridge stood over the wounded, her pistol in one hand and a medical knife in the other. "You want them? You go through me first." Kyle Patterson set his last demolition charge directly in the Queen's path. "This one's for all the close calls," he muttered, then triggered the device. The explosion caught the Queen's front legs, sending her crashing to the ground, but she rose again, kept coming. Morrison stepped forward, pulling out a long combat knife. "If this is how it ends, we go down fighting. We make them remember. We make them fear, because that's who we are. Marines!" "Ura!" the response thundered back. Then something unexpected happened. Brandon Cole's voice came through the command channel. "Hey, Captain, heard you could use some air support." The fighter craft screamed overhead, weapons blazing. They had expended all their missiles and most of their ammunition during the Hive assault. But they still had their guns, and they still had their courage. The fighters dove at the Queen, firing everything they had left. The massive creature roared in pain and fury. Cole's fighter pulled up so close to the Queen that his wingtip actually struck her armor. The impact damaged his aircraft, but he maintained control. "All fighters, switch to ramming speed, Gale," Cole ordered. "If we're going out, we're taking this thing with us." "Negative," Morrison shouted. "Cole, pull back, that's an order." "Sorry, Captain, pilot's prerogative. We don't leave Marines behind." "Not ever." The fighters lined up for their final run. They would crash into the Queen, sacrificing themselves to save the ground forces. It was insane. It was noble. It was perfectly, terribly human. But they never got the chance. From orbit, the Valiant itself descended. The cruiser, which should never enter a planetary atmosphere, pushed through the upper layers at impossible speeds. Grant had brought the entire ship down, ready to crash it into the Queen if necessary. The Valiant's remaining weapons fired at point-blank range. Energy beams and kinetic rounds struck the Queen's armor with devastating force. The creature's roar turned to a shriek of agony. "All hands, brace for impact!" Grant's voice was eerily calm over the ship-wide channel. "If we're doing this, we're doing it right." The Queen collapsed. Her massive body crashed to the ground, creating tremors that could be felt kilometers away. The Kreshtar warriors stopped their charge. Without their Queen, they had no direction, no purpose. They scattered into the wilderness, broken and leaderless. The battle was over, finally over. Zalthor realized he had been standing motionless for the entire final engagement. His multiple hearts were beating faster than he thought possible. He had just witnessed something that would haunt him forever, not because of its violence, though that was terrible enough, but because he had finally understood what the humans truly were. They were the species that simply refused to lose. The medical bay on Zalthor's command ship was overwhelmed. Human wounded filled every available bed and spilled into the corridors. Vrek's medical staff moved among them, confused by human physiology, but doing their best. The humans were patient with them, explaining their biology between gasps of pain. Zalthor walked through the medical bay, observing. One Marine had a broken arm but was helping treat others with his good hand. Another had burns across half her body but was laughing at something a medic said. A third was missing 3 fingers but insisted on keeping them, saying they were good luck, and he wanted to bring them home. The humans treated injury as a temporary inconvenience. Death was the only thing they truly respected. Marcus Webb sat on a bed, his leg in a regenerative cast. Zalthor approached him carefully. The sergeant looked up and smiled, though the expression was tight with pain. "Commander, come to check on the wounded?" "I wanted to see how you were recovering," Zalthor said. Your injury looks severe. Webb glanced at his leg. Fractured femur, torn ligaments, some muscle damage. I'll be back on duty in 3 weeks. 4 at most. 3 weeks? That injury would take a Vrex 3 months to heal. Yeah, well, humans heal fast. It's one of our things. We're hard to kill and harder to keep down. Webb shifted on the bed, wincing. Besides, I can't stay laid up too long. My squad needs me. Your squad performed admirably. You all did. Webb's smile became genuine. We did our job. Nothing special. That word again. Job. As if fighting impossible odds and surviving was simply employment. Zalthor struggled to understand it. Sergeant Webb, I must ask you something. Why did you fight so hard? This wasn't your colony. These weren't your people. You could have evacuated and let others handle the threat. Webb considered the question seriously. Commander, do you have family? I have a mate and 3 offspring. Yes. And if someone threatened them, what would you do? I would fight to protect them. Of course. Right. Well, humans see it a bit differently. Those colonists, they might not be related to us by blood, but they're still people. Still someone's family. Still worth protecting. Webb looked directly at Zalthor with those strange human eyes. We fight because we can. Because we have the ability to stand between innocent people and danger. That makes it our responsibility. It's that simple. But you risked death. Yeah. But they would have faced certain death without us. I can live with risk if it means someone else gets to live at all. Webb leaned back against his pillow. Besides, we're Marines. This is what we signed up for. We knew the job was dangerous when we took it. Zalthor left Webb to rest and continued his walk through the medical bay. He found Amanda Ridge, the medic, being treated for a shoulder wound. She was arguing with the Vrex doctor about her treatment plan. I'm telling you, I need to get back to my squad in 6 hours, Ridge insisted. Your injury requires at least 48 hours of rest, the doctor replied. I'll rest when I'm dead. Those are my people down there, and they need medical support. The doctor looked at Zalthor helplessly. Zalthor intervened. Medic Ridge, your soldiers are receiving excellent care from my medical staff. Ridge turned to him. With respect, Commander, your medical staff doesn't know human physiology. We're weird. Our bodies do things that don't make sense. I need to be there to make sure nobody dies from a simple injury because it was treated wrong. She wasn't being disrespectful. She was being practical, and she was right. Humans were strange creatures with odd biology. Their blood carried oxygen in a way that seemed inefficient. Their organs were arranged oddly. Their healing process was aggressive and often led to complications. Very well, Zalthor said. 6 hours, but you will rest until then. Ridge settled back with a satisfied expression. Thank you, Commander. Zalthor found Captain Morrison in the observation deck, looking down at Meridian 7. The planet was peaceful now. The Kreshtar were gone. The colonists were returning to their homes. Human engineering teams were already helping with reconstruction. Captain Morrison, Zalthor said. Morrison turned. He looked tired, very tired, but his eyes were still sharp. Commander Zalthor, what can I do for you? I wanted to thank you and to apologize. Apologize for what? For doubting you, for doubting your people. I thought you were arrogant and reckless. I was wrong. Morrison smiled slightly. You weren't entirely wrong. We are a bit reckless, and maybe a little arrogant too. But it gets results. You lost 13 soldiers. 13 wounded, Morrison corrected. 0 killed. That's a win in my book. Zalthor shook his head in amazement. You fought an army with a platoon. By all logic, you should have been destroyed. Yet you won. How? Morrison looked back at the planet. Because we fight differently than you do, Commander. The Vrex, the Thessians, the other elder races, you all fight very logically. You calculate odds. You minimize risks. You retreat when victory seems impossible. That is sound military strategy. It is. But humans don't think about victory that way. We don't ask if we can win. We ask what winning costs and if we're willing to pay that price. For those colonists, for innocent lives, we were willing to pay any price. Even your lives? Especially our lives. That's the whole point. A Marine's life has meaning because we spend it protecting others. Morrison turned to face Zalthor fully. You asked me earlier why we fight. Here's the real answer. We fight because somewhere in our evolutionary history, we learned that the strong must protect the weak. Not because of laws or orders or strategy, but because it's right. And humans will do absolutely anything for something we believe is right. Zalthor was quiet for a long moment. Your species frightens me, Captain Morrison. We frighten a lot of species. That's why the galaxy tells stories about us. No, you misunderstand. I am not frightened of your weapons or your tactics. I am frightened because you are predators who chose to be guardians. You have all the instincts of a hunter but the ethics of a protector. That combination is terrifying, because it means you will fight with absolute ferocity, but only for causes you believe in. And you believe in protecting the weak. Morrison's expression softened. Is that really so scary? Yes. Because it means making you angry is dangerous. But making you care is even more dangerous. You will fight harder for someone else's survival than you will for your own. Guilty as charged, Morrison said with a slight laugh. A communication alert interrupted them. Lieutenant Grant's voice came through. Captain, we have incoming. It's a human fleet. Admiral Rodriguez is here. Morrison's expression became carefully neutral. The Admiral? This should be interesting. An hour later, Admiral Rodriguez came aboard. She was older than the other humans Zalthor had met, with gray hair and a face marked by years of command. Her uniform was covered in decorations. She walked with the confidence of someone who had seen everything and feared nothing. Captain Morrison, she said formally. Report. Morrison stood at attention. Ma'am, Meridian 7 has been secured. Crescitar threat eliminated. 0 human fatalities. 13 wounded, all expected to recover fully. Rodriguez studied him silently. Then she smiled. Outstanding work, Captain. Absolutely outstanding. The colonists are singing your praises. The Coalition Council is very impressed. Just doing our job, Admiral. I know. That's what worries the Council. Rodriguez turned to Zalthor. Commander Zalthor, I presume? I've read your preliminary report. Very detailed. Very honest. Zalthor bowed slightly. I reported what I observed, Admiral. You reported that human forces are dangerously effective and operate outside standard military doctrine. You also recommended that the Coalition never, under any circumstances, make enemies of humanity. That is correct, Rodriguez laughed. It was a warm sound, but there was steel underneath. Commander, I appreciate your honesty. And you're right, humans are dangerous. We evolved as hunters on a death world that tried to kill us every single day. We learned to hunt prey faster than us, stronger than us, more numerous than us. We learned that giving up means dying, so we stopped giving up. She walked to the observation window, looking down at Meridian 7. When we reached space and met other species, we found something surprising. Most galactic races evolved on gentler worlds. They developed logic and reason and caution. Those are valuable traits, but they never developed what humans have. Stubbornness, crazy, irrational, refuse to die stubbornness. You wear it like armor. Zalthor observed. We do, and it makes us good at one thing above all others: protecting people who can't protect themselves. Rodriguez turned back to them. The galaxy fears us because we're predators, but that's only half the truth. We're predators who decided that hunting other sapient beings was wrong, so we hunt the things that hunt them instead. We're guardians by choice, not nature, and that makes us very, very dangerous to anything that threatens innocent lives. Zalthor understood now, truly understood. You have weaponized your compassion. Rodriguez smiled. That's a good way to put it, Commander. Most species fight for territory or resources or survival. Humans fight for ideals, for justice, for the lives of people we've never met. That makes us unpredictable, illogical, and very, very effective. A young human interrupted them. Private Danny Torres, the soldier who had carried Marcus Webb from the hive. He saluted nervously. Excuse me, Admiral Captain. Commander Zalthor, I wanted to thank you. Your medical staff took good care of us, better than we expected. You are welcome, Private Torres, Zalthor said. You fought with great courage today. Torres looked embarrassed. I was terrified the whole time, sir. But you fought anyway. That is the definition of courage. I guess. I just did what needed doing. What any Marine would do. After Torres left, Rodriguez spoke quietly. That's the secret, Commander. Humans aren't fearless. We're afraid all the time. But we don't let fear stop us. We feel it, acknowledge it, and then do the right thing anyway. That's our real strength. The Admiral departed soon after, taking most of the human fleet with her. But the Valiant remained in orbit for another week, helping with reconstruction efforts. Human engineers worked alongside colonists, rebuilding homes and infrastructure. Human medics trained local medical personnel on treating various injuries. Human soldiers played with colonist children, showing them that not all predators were dangerous. On the day of the Valiant's departure, Zalthor stood on the observation deck one final time. Captain Morrison joined him. You're leaving, Zalthor stated. We have other colonies to protect, other places that need help. You will never run out of work. Probably not, but that's okay. It gives us purpose. Morrison extended his hand. Commander, it's been an honor serving alongside you. Zalthor clasped the human's hand. The gesture felt natural now. The honor was mine, Captain. I witnessed something few in the galaxy have seen. I witnessed humans step onto a battlefield, and I finally understand why the galaxy fears you. And why is that? Because you are everything we are not. We calculate. You charge. We retreat from the impossible. You redefine what impossible means. We fight to win. You fight because it's right. We fear death. You accept it as the price of protecting others. Zalthor released Morrison's hand. You are what the galaxy needs, but you are also what the galaxy fears to become. Morrison nodded slowly. Maybe that's for the best. Fear keeps people careful, and careful means fewer wars. And if war comes despite that care, then humans will be there. Not because we want to fight, but because someone has to. And we can. The Valiant departed that evening. Zalthor watched it go, a small cruiser carrying 200 of the most dangerous warriors in the galaxy. They would find another battle, another impossible situation, another place where logic said they couldn't win. And they would win anyway, because they were human. And humans simply didn't know how to quit. Zalthor returned to his command center and began his final report to the Vrex Empire. He wrote carefully, choosing each word with precision. His conclusion was simple. Humanity is not our enemy, but pray we never make them one, because they fight with weapons we cannot match, not technology, not numbers, but absolute, unwavering refusal to abandon what they believe is right. They are predators who chose to be protectors, and there is nothing in the galaxy more dangerous than that. He attached his recordings of the battle, knowing that Vrek's military commanders would study them for years. They would analyze human tactics, try to understand human psychology, attempt to quantify what made humans so effective. But Zalthor knew they would never truly understand, because to understand humans, you had to accept something that seemed impossible to other species. You had to believe that sometimes the impossible was just another word for difficult, and difficult was just another challenge to overcome. Humans had shown him that, and he would never forget it.